Hello there, it's Jo from Minerva. We are on episode 10 of our Back to Basics series of learning to sew from scratch. Well done if you've stuck with us up until now. Today we're going to be making a top which will require lots more fitting than any of your other previous home sew garments that were in the previous episodes or the pyjama bottoms that were in episode 9. Today we're going to do a sew along of New Look 6483, which is a shell top pattern. It's been around a long time, but it's reorderable, so you should be able to get it on our website. It is listed below. It is a shell top pattern with different necklines, so you can have long shoulders, a square neck, a high neck, or you can wear it with sleeves. The skills we're going to build on today are adding darts and using some interfacing. We'll also be using all the skills that we learned in episodes 1 to 9. The pattern goes from bust 30.5 inches to 38 inches, and you need around 1 metre to 1.5 metres of fabric. So it's a really good make for a beginner sewer because you don't need very much fabric, so you can try out your skills without using 3 or 4 metres of fabric and wondering whether it's going to fit at the end. As you learn to sew and gain confidence, then making garments becomes the next sort of thing that maybe you'd like to try. And there, although you're using all the same skills, things don't get more difficult in terms of sewing, but they do get more difficult in terms of fitting. This pattern is, and all major pattern company patterns are drafted for a B cup. So if you've got a larger cup size than a B cup, then you're going to need to change the pattern. And that's the bit that starts to get slightly risky when you're making garments for yourself. If you've got a larger cup size than a B cup, then you need to find out how to do a full bust adjustment. If you've got a smaller cup size, then you need to find out how to do a small bust adjustment. Being able to do this adjustment means that you can get a good fit on the shoulders and the arms and the back and across your back without adding lots of volume in places that you don't want it. So make sure that you are trying your very best to measure your upper bust, so that's more your sort of rib cage size rather than just your full bust size. The fabric that I'm using today is a poly cotton gingham. It makes a really cute top. Looks so nice as a sort of vintage item with a capri pants, or you can wear it with a denim skirt, you can wear it with a long skirt, you can wear it with a cardigan. It's really versatile top to try. As with any garment making, as you're going along, you're going to be pressing every seam open and you're going to be finishing your seams. So finishing your seams, remember, is to zigzag down the edges on your sewing machine just through the seam allowance, not through the fabric as well. Or you can turn under the edge and sew a straight seam, or you can use pinking shears if you have a pair in your sewing box. We're using all the equipment that we collected in episode 1. So this is the sewing kit that I put together, which I keep in a shoebox, and that will make lots of garments. In my sew-alongs, I normally do a cut along part to music, but today we've done lots of cutting out, so you can go back to the cutting episode. And you could also check back on episode 9 where we cut out the pyjamas so that you can understand grain line. But today I want to show you some different techniques. So we're going to concentrate more today on the facings and the darts. There are 4 main pattern pieces to cut. So there is a front facing, which will be the shape of the neckline option that you've chosen. There is a front section that looks like a sort of vest shape, and you will need to transfer the dart pattern to your fabric. So you can do that with tailor's tacks, or you can mark it with pins and draw it on with some chalk. There are the back pieces, and they're not cut on the fold because there's going to be a join down the centre back of your top, and there will also be your back neck facing, and that's not cut on the fold, so you will have 2 of those opposites. So the facing pieces need some interfacing on the back, and interfacing is a type of material that you use to stiffen fabric and materials. You mustn't use one that's overly stiff, otherwise you'll spoil the neckline. So it just needs to be the same weight as the fabric. So this is a lightweight interfacing, and on one side it's gluey and it's a little bit rougher on that side, and it's smooth on this side, and the gluey side goes down to touch the fabric, and it's important that it does, and you double check it, otherwise it will be stuck to your iron. And you cut the same pieces of facing out of interfacing fabric and match the shapes up. And this is quite sensitive to iron heat, so it's a good idea to put a piece of cotton on top, or a piece of fabric, or a tea towel, or something to stop it sticking to your iron. And so you need to stick it to your fabric. It's good if you press rather than drag, because then you won't get any wrinkles on it. I also like to lay my pieces out as I'm going to use them, so that I make sure that I get the interfacing on the right side of the fabric, especially this gingham, because it's not overly clear which is the right side and the wrong side. So this is the neck, these are the shoulders, and these are the underarms. In the last sew along we used a Tilly and the Buttons pattern, which has quite clear explanations with photographs alongside each part, but if you use a big 4 pattern or a large manufacturer's pattern, then you will get an instruction sheet, and on it you'll still get illustrations and you'll get probably slightly less written instruction. But if you can learn to use these style patterns, then the world's your oyster, because it's the same language on all of those patterns. I'm going to follow the instructions as if you were following along. I'm making view D, so you need to make sure that as you're following these instructions, you're following the version for the one that you're making. So I'm making view D, and it starts off with stay stitching the neckline and adding the darts. When you stay stitch a neckline, you are stopping this fabric here that's cut across the grain from splitting or changing shape or stretching. So the first thing is to stay stitch through this neckline, which is a normal straight stitch just through the one layer of fabric. It's a normal row of stitching just through the one layer of fabric. Next we're going to make the dart, so have the markings on the wrong side. Find the 2 wider dart leg points and match those up so that there's a point on the one side and a point on the other, and put a pin in following the marking. And then these are called dart legs, and then there's a dart point, and you need to pin the point in place as well. You probably only need 2 pins, but you can definitely tack that if you want to. Try it on first, maybe hold it up to you, check that those darts are in the right place. You can also see if you want to make them narrower or wider. But if it's your first go, I would just make it as it is and try it and see. To sew a dart, you start at the wide end of the dart, not the point. So you start on the wide dart legs, and you take your fabric under the foot, needle down and forwards and back at the start, and then gently follow the line of the dart legs until you get towards the dart point. Now it's important here that it goes just gently towards your dart point. You don't want it to kink in or kink out, or you'll get a funny sort of pucker on the outside of your dart. And when you get to the end, you can use your hand wheel to roll the needle off the fabric, and you can maybe do one air stitch, a stitch that doesn't go through any fabric, because that will give you a little bit of thread to tie a knot at the end of your dart. So we're not going to forwards and back at the end, because that will make a sort of chewy lump at the end of the dart. and you tie the end of the threads off so that it doesn't come undone. Don't pull it too tight or you'll get a little pucker at the end. And then press your dart down. We've already put the interfacing on our facing sections, and now we're going to complete that facing unit and make it as one whole piece. And then we're going to do all the little stages that attach it onto the neckline of our top. On the front facing shoulders, press under 1.5 centimetres, and then we're going to trim off a little bit of that seam allowance so that it's just 6 millimetres left. The seam allowance on the whole pattern is 1.5 centimetres, and that's what you'll be keeping throughout, so that you make sure that all of your facing pieces fit together. Next, we're going to put the front facing right sides together. That's the right side of the fabric, the nice side touching the nice side, along here, and you'll know that you've got it matched up because there'll be some notches. There's one on the armhole there, and the same on this side. And you match up the same two shapes together all the way around the neck. Going to pin that in place, and then we're going to sew the arm here and around the neck. It now says to layer the seam, which means to take out the interfaced seam allowance. So layering it means you're going to take one layer of fabric out so that it's not so bulky around the neckline. Clip curves means to take out some of this fabric here on the curve, because then you won't have fabric bunching behind on that curved part of your seam. And this is everything you do before you turn it the right side out. I cannot recommend that you have a small pair of scissors by your machine high enough. Trying to do this with big dressmaking scissors really does just encourage a massive cutting error. So the little scissors are perfect for this. So this is called clipping the curves. So that's a layered seam and clipped curves. And now I can turn right side out. And press. And on the back, you will have zigzagged along the edge of your facing, and all of your facing should fit around your neckline and your armhole. Turning to the back, we're going to stay stitch the back neckline, join up the centre back seam and the side seams and the shoulder seams. Stay stitch the neckline, which is that one line of stitching through just the neck piece, because you've cut across the weave of the fabric, so you'll get a little bit of stretching if you don't stay stitch it, and your back neck will gape. So stay stitch the neckline and then stitch the centre back seam between the dot and the bottom. So you don't sew right up to the top, because this is where your slit will be for getting your top on and off, and there was a little dot on the paper piece to mark for your size, and that's where you start your sewing stitch line. Next, you're going to press that seam open and finish the edges. On the back neck, I'm going to apply the interfacing exactly the same as we did for the front. So press down the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance and trim it back by 6 millimetres, and we're going to attach that around the neck and the armhole edge. There's notches to match if you're struggling to get the curve in the right place. Once you've applied the interfacing, you can flick it back out like you did with the front and press it, and you should have a split V there. So you've sewn around the neckline, but that includes going down the side of the split. At the base of the back, where the two facings meet, you can slip stitch that down. So you can just attach that to the seam allowance. You can use the whip stitch from our hand sewing episode. So that your work is all neatly finished, you need to know how to finish off the shoulder seam, making sure that all of the seam allowance is enclosed into the shoulder. Now we're going to join the shoulder seams together. So you're going to line up the shoulder seams and stitch across the end. Now you've got to be careful not to catch those folded edges. So you might want to just pin those back and out of the way a little bit, but you'll be keeping a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So you'll be sewing across the ends, which is the right side of the front against the right side of the back, and then you'll have the facings on the inside, and you hand stitch those up. When you've sewn across the end, you can trim a little bit of the seam allowance off, and then that goes inside, and the two folded edges that you pressed down earlier will meet up, and you can hand stitch those closed. We're going to hem the top. It's got little side splits, so you'll be looking for a notch on the side seam so that you know how far to sew the side seams and leave the slits open. When you sew up the side seams, you need to make sure that you stop at the point to allow for some side splits at the side. You could tack this now, so you tack through the facing, and you could try it on, so because there's an element of fit that you can get by before you sew the side seams. Not loads, but you might know whether to take a small seam allowance here or a slightly wider one to get the best fit for your chest size. Your top is now finished, apart from the hem and hemming these slits on the side. You're going to press up your seam allowance, so that's 1 centimetre and 1 centimetre, and I'm going to show you how to do a mitered corner. So you take a marker and you mark the very corner of your slit, and then you're going to fold across the end of your slit. So you should have a right angle, and then refold where you've done your pressing and fold everything to that point that you've just marked in the corner. And now you can hem along here, over that corner, up to where you've cut the slit, across, and then carry on around. So when you stitch, you'll be stitching from the wrong side and making sure that you keep the same distance from the hem edge to the turned up edge, and then on the right side you'll have the same distance all the way around. When you get to the mitre, you can hold it down with your pin, lift the foot, pivot and turn. There are a couple of ways that you can finish the back neck of your top. You can add a thread bar, which is a little hand sewn loop, and it shows you how to do that in the instructions. Or if you want to fall back on the skills that we've been learning so far, you can put a hook and eye at the top of your back neck. I'm going to put a hook and eye on the top, so I will start with the hook. The hook lines up with the edge of the fabric and you sew through the 2 holes. Here's my shell top finished. So this is view D with the slightly squarer neck, which I really like. I've got my bust darts pointing towards my bust but not running over the top. If your darts are running over the top, you'll sort of get a squashed flat shape, so you need them to just be taking some of the fullness out of the side. Got the splits in the side which make it really comfortable across the hips, and it's really well finished all around the shoulders. All of the casing is enclosed, and that is view D. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along today, and it's given you a little bit of confidence to try a pattern maybe from one of the major pattern companies. Or you could also have a go at making the one with the sleeves. So when you buy a pattern, it's not necessarily a one-hit wonder. You can maybe change it up a little bit. You might have found lots of things out about your first make. You might have found out that the shoulders are a bit wide, or that the neck's too high or low, or you definitely might have found out that the bust fit isn't right. And that's where I recommend that you go and find out how to do a bust adjustment on a pattern. It seems really complicated, but actually you're just making a couple of cuts in the tissue piece and giving yourself an extra couple of inches. All the products that I've used are listed below, so if you want to make New Look 6483, they are all there, so you can go and find them. And I hope that you will continue to grow as you learn to sew and make more and more garments and things for your home and for yourself. If you've made a top, we would love to see it, so do post it up on Minerva. Make sure you've made a free account for yourself and signed up to our newsletter so that you can see all our promotions and offers. You'll get lots of love and support and inspiration from all the Minerva makers over on our website. Thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.